1 plus 1 equals 3. If you're really good at addition, you might even get more than 3 from 1 and 1. You just need to know what elements to combine and in what way. There are certain elements that give back far more than their sum when added with the right counterpart. The concept of yin and yang comes to mind as a prime example. If you have only one side, then you have an imbalanced symbol, no circle, and no counterpart for balance. When you add the equal and opposite side, you have a complete circle that offers a cycle of light to dark and dark to light, and this circle elevates both the light and the dark, making each side greater than it was in isolation. In music, there is an identical relationship between feeling and thinking. These two elements complement and complete each other. Each side has unique offerings that the other could never provide, but when paired with the other, each side is strengthened and elevated. The trick with either of these symbols is finding the balance between the contrasting sides by knowing how and when to engage with both sides. If either side is favored or forgotten, we'll never have an optimized product or experience. When we utilize the symbiosis between feeling and thinking, we are revitalized by our music today, while increasing our ability to stay meaningfully engaged in the future. We can learn to engage through choice, and we'll know what tools we should use to optimize our musical engagement in practice, in performance, in musical tests, at home, and in the concert hall. This is a process I call listening theory, which can be summarized by its thesis statement. How you listen determines what you hear. What you hear determines how you feel and think. The key to the whole process that balances feeling and thinking is listening. That's where your choice and actions combine to determine what you hear or take in. Once you've heard something, your body and mind will do the rest. But when you take an active approach to listening, you have autonomy over the whole process, which is the goal of listening theory. It's important to differentiate between listening and hearing. Hearing is what we take in or what we receive. The Washington Post experiment titled "Stop and Hear the Music" provides a clear example of this difference. In 2007, the violinist Joshua Bell performed in a Washington, D.C. metro for almost an hour, as if he was a busker. For his performance of 6 works by Bach on his Stradivarius, he earned a grand total of $32.17. There's a video clip of this experiment, and the most revealing element when it comes to listening and hearing is this: only a handful of the hundreds of metro users stopped to listen. How the metro users listened determined what they heard, and most people didn't stop to hear the free concert from Joshua Bell. Listening is what we do to take in the music. Hearing is what actually enters our heart, body, and mind. While these definitions are a starting point, to understand listening, we need to work out a system that defines it. And that leads us back to these two foundational elements of listening: feeling and thinking. My hypothesis is that all active listening could fall into one of these two categories, feeling and thinking. How then does thinking work in listening? There are 4 things that thinking will offer musicians. 1, increased knowledge. 2, language that allows you to discuss music. 3, a system of rules that creates parameters for music. And 4, all of those combined to give you the option to make an informed critique about music. Thinking is a form of listening that is frequently used by academic musicians or any music student. We can take virtually any musical question and use thinking to find an answer that we can both verbalize and evaluate for accuracy. Courses in music theory and music history are largely developed in a way that enhances the student's ability to think about music. There is a key component of thinking that needs to be understood, especially in regards to listening. Thinking is an out-of-time process. What do I mean by that? That when you think, you're never quite in the moment. Thinking takes you out of the moment and into your head, into that cognitive processing place that always separates you to some degree from your senses. If you focus on any physical sensation, room temperature, your big toe, or your appetite, and then begin to think, the sensation will diminish. If thinking takes us out of the moment, what puts us into the moment? This is where feeling comes in, and where we should turn our attention to this question: what does feeling offer us in music? Feeling offers joy, peace, exuberance, transcendence, meaning, awe, catharsis, and connection. Above all, feeling offers us something thinking can't: access to the moment, specifically immersive connection in the moment, the time and place where musicians and audiences can come together in a transcendent and shared experience, shared via the music. Comparing thinking and feeling to the yin and yang symbol, I believe that feeling offers 50% of all that music could bring to you, while thinking has the other 50%. But you can only access all that feeling offers as you develop the thinking aspect, and the same is true in reverse. If you want the best of either side, then you need both approaches. While most approaches to musical education offer many resources that contribute to the thinking side, it's important to remember that thinking in isolation is never an ideal approach to listening. It's an easy trap for trained musicians to fall into, where they get pulled into this primary approach of only engaging with music through thinking. So how can you listen? What options do you have when it comes to listening beyond a feeling or thinking approach? This is where we move into a system I call the 4 filters of listening. My hypothesis is that these 4 filters combined capture all types of active listening. I use the word filter because each of these approaches alter the information and stimuli that pass through them, and they all do it differently. A filter allows certain material through while excluding other material, and these filters do the same as we actively listen. There are 2 thinking filters and 2 feeling filters. The thinking filters are the analytical filter and the critical filter, while the feeling filters are the experiential filter and the exploratory. The analytical filter. When we analyze, we break something down into individual components and study each one so we can understand it and master it individually. Then we know what it is and where it fits into the whole. When I perform a piece, I can identify components such as key signature, time signature, harmonies and harmonic progressions, dynamic range, idiomatic gestures for the composer or instrument, and so on. If you can talk about something in detail, it shows that you understand the individual components and how they work to make a whole. You can discuss things after you've done your analysis. It goes without saying that this is a major component in coming to understand music deeply. The critical filter. The critical filter is taught very early in someone's musical education. One of the first things a student of music must learn is whether they're doing things correctly or not. When the critical filter is present, we're using a rubric, something that tells us what is right and what is wrong, what is successful or unsuccessful, what is good and what is bad. This rubric also clarifies when we want more of this and less of this. There's one key difference between this filter and the analytical. Instead of just identifying what elements are present, you're focusing on whether those elements are effective and merited. The experiential filter. The experiential filter is used when you put your primary focus on your body's reaction to the music. We're talking about the visceral reaction that the music creates. And to fully focus on this, you have to forego thinking. Because when you are thinking, you are out of the moment. And when you're out of the moment, you cannot be fully connected with your body and its reactions. This filter doesn't need to explain why something is beautiful. It just needs to feel that it is. We usually engage with music this way when something seizes us, which can make it a challenging filter to maintain at will. To immerse yourself in the experiential filter, you have to achieve a singularity between yourself and the music, which is why hearing the music in the moment is vital. I believe we can practice this approach, setting aside thinking to engage more with the feelings that music creates inside us. And lastly, the exploratory filter. The exploratory filter is, in my observations, rarely used. It is a challenge to both initiate and maintain this filter. Why? Because the exploratory filter is used when you're paying full attention to the music, but you don't know what you're looking or listening for. This filter requires that you begin with a blank slate and then zoom out to feel the music populate that slate, never connecting with the details, but always observing the grand arc or big picture. With each filter introduced, it's easier to identify the pros and cons of each approach. To frame these pros and cons, I want to pose a few questions. Do you know when you're thinking about music instead of feeling it? Can you tell the difference? Especially for trained musicians, how often do you take time just to listen via feeling, setting aside thinking so you can fully connect with the music in the moment? With those questions in mind, let's return to the filters. The analytical filter is heavily used in music lessons, music classrooms, and musical discussion. It's one of the main approaches we use to expand our knowledge. But when we focus on expansion, we're more focused on the future. And that means we're using the moment to increase future returns and future connection to music. Since so much of intentional connection with music can be done through analysis, it's important to remember that when we're analyzing, we're engaging with something via its parts instead of the whole. Next, the critical filter. This filter is best used for a short amount of time and usually should be employed after something is done, not during. I've had many experiences where I turn this filter on far too early, criticizing something before I really know what it is. This filter burns hot, and if we overuse it, we distort our perception and approach. The critical filter is vital in a digital age where both music and information can be aggressively in your face. It allows you to choose what music you'll let affect you, as a part of critique is determining what music you'll seek out and which music you'll ignore or mute. While analysis and critique are both thinking filters, they can be used in isolation, meaning you can analyze something without labeling it right or wrong. If our critical filter is always on, there will be a great deal that you will never hear as a musician. Let's move on to the feeling filters. This is where 1 + 1 = 3. Thinking is 1, feeling is 1, but when they combine, you can get 3 or more. Feeling has a specific function. It has the power button for the whole mechanism of listening, which makes it vital that musicians know how to power on their connection with music at will. So how do you activate that power button? First, you must leave the domain of thinking. The power switch isn't over there. Second, you need to be in time, which leads us to the exploratory filter. In my experience, musicians engage with music first through analysis and critique, and then maybe briefly through the exploratory filter. I think this pattern is detrimental to listening because our initial hearing of a piece is based on individual components, not the whole. In an overly saturated market, we also move quickly to the critical filter, and then we risk labeling a work as mediocre or just okay, when it could be much more. When first listening to music, take in as much as you possibly can. Engage with the big picture. You never know what you'll feel and discover when using the exploratory filter, which sets it up as both an amazing initial filter and an incredible filter to use later in your listening process. Exploration can reinvent and rejuvenate any piece of music. And now, the experiential filter. The best verb I can use for actively engaging with the experiential filter is the verb be. You're not doing, you're being. And a skeptic might ask, being what? Being present, present in the music. This is where many musicians, amateurs or professionals, get stuck in a almost doing the real thing state, almost being present. The thing that causes this almost state most often is this: all their active listening is done via thinking. Thinking on any level separates us from full presence in the moment. In my opinion, all filters point us toward the experiential, where we're done doing and simply get to be present in the music. Listening theory is grounded in these ideas. There are 4 filters of listening, and those filters stem from the relationship of feeling and thinking. So what does listening theory offer those who study and practice it? First, it offers an approach to music that balances feeling and thinking. This is the key to continuous and immersive connection with music, no matter the form of your engagement, performing, studying, or just listening. Second, listening theory provides vital insight into our temporal approach by making us aware of our temporal perspective, meaning we can identify where we are in time. We have to know how to identify and shift our temporal perspective to optimize our connection with music. Third, listening theory highlights the importance and potential of choice. The 4 filters give distinct options for engaging with music, and once those options are identified and understood, then musicians can choose how they engage with music. How you listen determines what you hear, and hearing affects feeling and thinking. If we can't choose how we listen, then we have no autonomy over feeling or thinking, and I just don't believe that's true. Listening theory offers distinct choices to musicians, expanding their agency over feeling and thinking. Fourth, listening theory has a smooth integration into any branch of musical education. Listening theory doesn't aim to take away from any system, just to expand its core, which I believe is listening, as listening is the essential bridge to connect with music. Since every principle of listening theory can be applied outside performance, writing, or formalized study, it can be integrated easily as a student or teacher wants into any other course of study, and can also be pursued as an independent project by musicians of any level. Fifth, listening theory offers a pathway to musical rejuvenation, especially for musicians who listen all the time. How do you keep your passion alive for your art every day when you're practicing your art for hours every day? You have to access the experiential filter regularly. I'd say daily, to maintain an optimal connection to music. When you are always listening, it's especially easy to default into one type of listening, and that leads to fatigue, ear fatigue, in almost every instance. So knowing how to listen gives you a key to get back from the sound that surrounds you every day. The experiential filter gives you a clear goal for using all 4 filters and results in potent musical moments that, to me, are the key to staying awake and alive musically. A good listener knows how to use all 4 filters. Even more than that, a good listener knows how to shift from one filter to another, and also knows when a certain filter should be employed. Fluid listening is key, but to begin, you must know where you are as a listener. Are you in the moment, or are you out of it? Are you analyzing, or are you critiquing? Once you know where you are, then you can deduce what your approach allows you to hear, and from there you can choose where you'll go and how you'll get there. How you listen determines what you hear, and what you hear determines how you feel and think. Listening is essential to connecting to music, but we rarely talk about it and don't know how to describe it. But if you want to enjoy music, if you want to be immersed in it, then there's no better approach than listening. After my bachelor's and master's degrees, and as a third-year doctoral student, I've come to the following conclusion. The most beneficial parts of my musical education were not when I learned how to use the piano better. They were not when I aced a music theory project or learned a fascinating bit of history. The moments I'll never forget came when I best connected with music. And all those moments had one thing in common. I was most focused on listening. When connection to music seems weak or tenuous, or when you don't have the drive and motivation to practice, when you have to perform, but you want it to be more than a have to, maybe all that is needed is a new approach to listening.